really delighted that you've been able to join us up here in the Penthouse Suite interviews. We really appreciate you taking time out of what we know is a very busy schedule, so thank you very much.
I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Julien is almost a member of the Charleston and the Faisal families, so we're like a family up here. So let me get started and ask you the first question. Initially, you served as the director of the Science and Technology Libraries at the University of Lille for some years. And then in March, you became director of a much expanded library and learning center at the university. So can you tell us a little bit about that expansion and how library services have changed and improved as a result?
Yes. So let me tell you a little bit about the story of the merging of the universities in Lille, because that's the merging of 3 universities to create a very large one, a very research intensive in Lille. So as you said, since 2005, I've been serving as the director of the library system at the University of Lille, Science and Technology. So it was, let's say, a middle-sized university, but research intensive in France, something like 20,000 students, and most of the labs of the university were connected to science and technology. We also had some humanities and social science, but it was only part of the system. Mm-hmm. And we had one main central library, which was the former Library for Science and Technology, which is now the core of Liliad. Maybe we'll talk about that building later on. In 2012, the presidents of the 3 public universities in Lille decided that there was an opportunity to merge the 3 universities to create the biggest French university for the moment. And that's the reality now, because we have a merged university in Lille of nearly 80,000 students, which is the biggest one in France for the moment. Lyon will come and will be even bigger in 1 year. That's what happened. So why did they decide to merge the 3 universities? It was because the 3 universities, Lille number 1, the one in which I was, and the other 2 were not comprehensive universities. So they decided that to perform research properly, they had to be all together. And there was also at that time the idea that the French government could give some extra money to very research intensive oriented universities. And that was the main reason why they decided to create this university. So as you said, it has been created in 2018. The president of the new university has been chosen, elected at the beginning of 2018. And of course, since we have only now 1 university, the idea was to have only 1 library system. So we merged the 3 libraries starting in 2015. It was at the beginning of a story. We worked on the catalog, we worked on the electronic resources, we worked on the model from moving from the former 3 universities to create a new one. And the first step at the beginning of 2018, after the election of the president, was to choose a library director, a dean for the libraries. Mm-hmm. So we've been through a selection process. An international board has been appointed to choose the library director, and I'm very happy to be the one who has been chosen to do that. So that was only the beginning of the story. We needed the head. My deputy was also appointed at the same time, or nearly the same time. So spring 2018, we had the deputy and the director of the library system. And then we created a board of head of departments, because we had head of departments in every former universities, just to start working on the definition of the new strategy for the library system. The time was very fortunate at that moment, because we were at the beginning of an evaluation process. Maybe you have the same kind of thing in the US, but in France, every 5 years, we have an evaluation process by an independent agency for higher education and research, just to check the situation of the university regarding teaching, learning, and research. So that was the beginning of the process. So we started with a team to prepare an auto-evaluation of the situation. It was done by summer 2018, and then we could work after summer to prepare the strategic plan. So we worked in September till November on a new strategic plan, so the kind of direction we wanted to work. And we presented the new strategy to the administration board of the university by the end of 2018. So it has been voted there, and then we had the direction, and maybe we will talk about that later on, which we had to follow for the months to come. And then in spring 2019, we started to implement that new strategy. And the first step for that was to create the organization charts of the new library system. So we had the directions, and then we decided to create several services, several departments, just to be able to implement properly the new strategy. The new chairs, the new heads of departments have been chosen last summer, so a few months ago, and now they have been started working on the internal organization of their departments. And it will be probably totally done by next spring. So this is a very long process. We are still in, it's still a working process, but hopefully we will have the full organization ready next year. And this is very important for us to move to a new organization, because I didn't talk about the size of the former library systems, but just to give you an overview, we had 3 library systems before, between 60 to 80 people in each. And we merged the 3 library system, and we also added a small extra service, which was working on the digitalization and other issues. So now the new structure is basically a bit more than 200 people working on 4 main libraries, so in every campus. So 2 of the universities, Lille number 1 and Lille number 3, were only on one site before, and now we are mainly on 5 campuses. So we needed to have much more transversal organization. So this is why we decided to wait for the strategy and then refurbish the charts of the library.
So you got to keep all the staff. I mean, you didn't lose any staff in this. You assembled them all together.
Yes. So just the first thing I have to say is that the situation regarding staff is a bit different in France than it is in the States. We have more civil servants, so and we have a lot of civil servants. So the situation is the following: when we merged the structures, we had to keep the civil servant, of course, whether we are happy with them or not, because they are there. So basically, yes, all the staff, all the civil servants has been merged in the new organization. We also have in our teams people who are not civil servants. So the situation could be a little bit different for those people. Because the merging of the 3 universities was, let's say, a difficult time for the new university, because it cost a lot to merge the structure, and the government in France did not help us at the level we expected to be helped. So we had some budget cuts at the moment, including the libraries. So we were not able to replace all the staff. So it was just a limited number of people, but we had to get rid of some people at that moment. Not lots, but some of them.
It's complicated, yeah.
Yeah, that was difficult to merge, 3 library systems when the political level say to you, but that's the same for the labs, for the teaching departments of the university. You have to do more with less money and a bit less people. So, and now the situation is a bit difference because the financial situation of the university is fine, it's better than it was last year. So we've been able to compensate the loss we had and to recruit again some people just to cover the gap we had. So situation now is fine, and it's very helpful because it helps our people, our staff, to understand that the merging of the three universities can be a plus for the newly united university, and not only something which has to do with cost reduction, staff reduction, and so on.
Before we continue about your vision for the new expanded Lille University, can you just tell me, you said when the Lyon universities merge, they will be even bigger. How many are merging and how many students will there be?
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
I think that the newly merged University of Lyon will be a bit less than 100,000, so even more than Lille. Hopefully it will be done by the beginning of between 2020 and 2021. So they are at the beginning of the process. So they say now that the merging will be done January 1st, 2020, but it will maybe be postponed. I'm not the right person to talk about that, but it will be probably done within 2 years.
So is this a trend in France?
Yes, that's a big trend in France because the French ministry wanted to have some champions in France. As you may know, we have some difficulties being at the right level in France in the Shanghai ranking, for example. That's not because we have high-level research in France, but that's because the organization in France having research structures on one hand, CNRS, for example, but we have other research structures, and universities on the other hand, it can happen that the way citations are done do not include all the researchers from all the institutions. So we lose some visibility in that. And the merging of the university is a perfect occasion to have a look at that, to say now all the people will sign this way, and even the researchers from research structures, that is done since last year, will sign with a university signing because they belong to the research infrastructure and belong to the university. And so they will sign with the university name, because a research structure, just like in France, CNRS, IFREMER, and so on, it means nothing when you are outside France because it's not organized this way in the States, in UK, and so on. So the French Ministry for Education very wisely has said to the research structure, okay, you conduct the research, you will be there tomorrow as you are now, but it will be very helpful for our ranking, for our universities, that your researchers who also belong to the university use the right signing. So we are in the middle of that. So the merging of the universities in France is a good opportunity not to have any more, just like in Lille, people signing Lille Science and Technology, Lille number one Science and Technology. So we've refurbished all that, and now we have University of Lille, which is very international. All the people sign like that, and we go up in the ranking just thanks to that.
So you provide a standardization
Yes,
of how the
we
researchers...
provide that. And the French ministry is giving a lot of money to merged university, very research intensive. So they provide some money. We use the benefits of that money to support research. So for example, for the University of Lille, we have some money, just like 500 million euros on a bank account, so we can use the benefits of that money to cover research expenses. So that really makes the difference between merged university, very research intensive, and other university which do not have that specific money.
Interesting. So here you are with this shiny, big, new, expanded, wonderful Lille University and Library. and you've just developed a strategy. What are some of the elements of the strategic vision, and what kind of new and interesting plans do you have in mind for your library?
So we have 6 strategic directions. The first of them is regarding buildings. So as you know, we are on 5 campuses, but we have central libraries on 4 campuses. One is for law and economics, one is for medicine, one is for HSS, and one is for, let's say, science and technology. So these are the main campuses. We are very fortunate regarding our central libraries, because we have 2 brand new libraries, one which is very recent and one which is older, needs to be refurbished, but we have the money at the moment.
Okay.
So the 2 brand new libraries is the medicine one, and is Lille. Maybe we will talk about it. So it's much more than a library. So it's also including even facilities, a place where we show the research in the labs of the university and so on. So they are brand new. They've been opened in 2016. We have one for economics and law, which is from the beginning of the years 2000, so it's pretty new. And we have in the HSS campus a very old library which needs to be refurbished. So this is the first angle, the first direction of our strategy. This is the refurbishment of the HSS library, which is very central for us for several reasons. And because also the main HSS campus is an old one which needs to be refurbished. So the president of the university, in his strategy regarding very important building, very important refurbishment, has put as a center of his strategy the refurbishment of his building, which will be the most important refurbishment for the new University of Lille, because it's a very large building, 17,000 square meters, so it's the biggest one we have, in which we will have, of course, facilities just like rooms for people to work together, just like a cafe, just like open stacks, just like quiet study rooms and so on. But we will also have new areas in this building, mainly 2 spaces. We will have a place for PhD students, just like a house for PhD students, because we know that in HSS, the lab, it's not where people conduct their research, just like in science and technology, where they have all those tech and all those tools they need to use. The lab for HSS is the library. So we wanted to deliver the most wonderful experience inside the library, so we will create a postgraduate space with all the facilities they need in this library. So that's the first part. And the second part, it's the counterpart of what we have in Lille with the event facilities. We will have a place where we will be able to have some exhibitions, because the new University of Lille does not have a nice, very important, very big, very well developed place where we can have top level exhibitions. So we will have that included in this building. So that will be the very heart of the campus and one of the most important places in the university for the future. So that's the first angle, that's the building. The second angle, the second direction is collection development. As you know, we have now a comprehensive university. We have developments in every area. We're researchers in every area. So, of course, we want to keep the level, the quality of the collections we have, physical collections, and also electronic collection, electronic resources, of course. We have digital libraries regarding special collections, and we have a special collection areas with manuscripts, with incunabula, and so on. And we want to be able to let's say, build a structure to support that specific collection, so that we can have support from all the areas. So it's more or less traditional, but collection development is also important for us. The third direction is research support, and this is very central for us. We've been working for research support for many years in the former universities, but the merging of the three universities is an incredible opportunity for us, because we can concentrate some people now. We can specialize some people on that. So we can have some people specialize on, let's say, support for data management plan writing, for example.
Right.
We can support them in their strategy, in the researcher's strategy to choose a data repository. We have now an open access repository in the university, a local one connected to the National Archive, which is called AL. So we are also, we try to help to align the identifiers, the permanent identifiers we use, and so on. We are also part of the bibliometry tool of the university. So this is one of very important direction we have, and we have organized a department, a full-size department to support all of that. Teaching support is also very important. So license, master, PhD, and research. And we want something to be, we want just like a continuum from license, even before people coming from high school, getting to the university, then license, master, PhD, and so on. We try to do it physically, face-to-face, when we can, but of course we can't be there for all the students of the university. Every year we are able to teach for, let's say, 15,000 students. 15,000 students out of 80,000 students. So it's not so much, but it's important. The other kind of help we can provide is building MOOCs, so that people can have a look at what we produce online. And we also have, let's say, some soft teaching. So meaning that we organize conferences, we organize meetings and so on, so the students, especially masters and PhD students, can come, attend, and get some information out of that. So teaching is also important. We try to have a, let's say, a regional coherence of the what we can provide for higher education and research libraries. We got a partnership with teaching and research institutions, which is downtown, in a smaller one, but which is downtown in Lille, and we all together put some money on the table so that we can open very at very large hours the central library they have downtown. So we try to be coherent so that we can put some efforts in places where the students are, and not where we think the students could be. So most of our campuses are outside downtown, so we have this strategy also to provide spaces downtown. And the last and sixth direction we have is what we call mediation. So we talked a little bit about what we will do about exhibitions, but we also have two very important spaces. One is the event facilities of the university. So we organize 300 events a year, just like conferences, Library Conference, the FSLA, and so on. We also host conferences from our partners and so on. So this is part of our strategy, and this is very central for the university, because the place is very nice, very attractive. And we also provide a space which is called Experium, which is a showcase of the research of the university. So there we show what is happening, what is at stake in the labs of the university, not what will happen in the coming years, but what the research is today. And we open that to private companies, but most of the time we open that to young people from secondary school, coming with their teachers, so that they can feel the flavor of the research and of higher education. Before, a few years before, we had that space. People were coming to the labs, and you know what a lab is. A lab is a place where people conduct research.
They're working.
So
Right.
they're working in that place. So it's not sexy,
Right.
you know. So when you have a young people, 16 years old, he's coming there, well, he starts playing with his phone and saying it's
Right.
quite boring.
Yeah, right.
So we organize a place just like a showcase where really we show how it's happening, but in a good way, so that we can interact with people. We get PhD students talking with those young people, because when it's a boring professor of 60 years old, no one is listening. When it's a young people 5 years older than the guy or the girl from the secondary school, then he or she can imagine that in a few years she will be there. So the discussion is somehow different. So that's the sixth direction we have. It's what we call mediation in our strategy.
It really is remarkable what you're doing. You're doing so many things, and I'm very impressed by this, the last one in particular, because of the community involvement and how it enables the university to reach out into the community and have the community to reach back in. I think that's really wonderful that you all do
Yeah,
that.
we try to enlarge the territory of the library. You know, I really think that the future of the library is gaining over territories, so that we not only concentrate on giving access to content. Of course, we give access to content, and that will be core business. But around that, we can develop strategies to be present in other areas for the university. Because when you have a look at where decision making is happening in the university, we can basically say that we need to be present in three areas. One is campuses life. You see, we have libraries very wide open with cafes and so on. So we are part of the campus life of the library. And when the library is closed, the campus life is not so good. And when the library is open, everything is happening in the middle of the campus around the library. So we are there with our equipments. You know, we developed concepts everywhere, just not only in Lille, but everywhere, just like third places, places where people can meet, can socialize, can work alone, can work all together, can get access to collections and so on. So we are there. That's fine. The two other pillars we have is teaching and learning. So we talked about that. We try to be there in every aspect. It's not very easy, but we try to be there in every aspect. And the last one is research support, and we also talked about that. So if we are able to be there in all these areas, to have, let's say, events regarding teaching and learning, to have some conversations with people in labs, so that they come to a library, they use the spaces, they organize meetings, they organize conferences, they come to our experience to show what they are doing, then the conversation is different. And then the head of the library, the head of the services inside the library are seen differently. They are partners. They are not only the people who are delivering access to content.
Now, Julien, you also play a leadership role in Library, and I was wondering, for those of us who aren't familiar with what Library is, could you tell us what it is and what purpose it serves?
Yeah. Library is the main research library association in Europe. So more or less it's the same position as ARL in the States. Okay. We have a bit less than 500 members in Europe. So institutions, libraries, but representing institutions. The most intensive research institutions are there. So everything connected to research support, to library and research is happening more or less in Library. So it's a very old association, because it's something like 50 years old. It was created in the 1970s, and it has changed a lot since a few years. We moved, let's say, from a gentleman's club 20 years ago to something different now, much more inclusive, with let's say a high-level strategy to support research institutions. So we in Library we have worked on a new strategy, 2018-2022, with a vision of what the future of research libraries could be. And we also have some pillars. The first pillar of the strategy we have developed is that we deeply believe that the future of publication will be open access. So, and it's very connected to Plan S, but maybe we will talk about that later on. We also believe that we should rely on research infrastructures, which are participatory, which are tailored and scaled to the right level. So we try to play a role in that, so that every discipline can have the right answer in the European landscape, and not only, let's say, hard sciences with very, very big infrastructures and so on. We also think that the future will be digital, and we are there, even in humanities and social science. So we deeply think that we need to develop and help developing for the future the right digital skills for us inside the libraries, but also for researchers. We think that in the future we will have to have more and more, let's say, digital offices, digital stewardships, and so people who can help in that area. And the last thing in the strategy is that we also believe that the documentation, the collections we are producing tomorrow, the information we are producing tomorrow will be the heritage collection of tomorrow. So this is quite an ambitious strategy. We rely on several steering committees. So we have basically 3 steering committees with working groups dealing with copyright, innovative metrics, open science, open access, digital skills. So connected to the strategy we have presented, and we also have a very ambitious action plan. So we have a main conference every year happening in June. So some 500 people coming from all over Europe, but also people coming from the States, coming from Asia, coming from Africa, South America, so people from outside Europe coming there. We have some very ambitious, but I think we will maybe talk about that, program for leadership inside Libre. And we also provide some webinars. We have the Libre Quarterly, which is an open access publication, an open access journal for all the community and so on. So we deliver services for the community. And last summer, during the Dublin conference, the General Assembly has approved a new ambitious plan so that we can make a step further. So we will develop in the future new actions. So we will have a midterm event starting next year, because the main conference is a very busy one, is a very successful one. So we're growing and growing and growing every year. And we don't want to grow the size of an IFLA conference, because we know that we need to keep the networking quality inside the conference. So we want to create another event so that we can have 2 events and people can choose at which conference they want to go. We also will develop in 2 years a strategic planning event so that decision makers in library can share the experience of strategic planning inside their university. We will develop European studies. We will develop more seminars in the future. We will develop lobbying in Brussels and so on. So this is a very ambitious plan now. And I have to say that Libre has a very important role in Europe. We played a role in the copyright reform, because we were there to present our strategy and our ambition for that, and I think people had listened to what we had to propose. So yes, Libre is a very important association in Europe now.
Yeah, in fact, you've been quoted as saying that Libre is a place where the role of European universities and research libraries is and will be redesigned. for the future.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, how do you envision that happening, and what will that future look like?
It's difficult to have a clear vision about the future. You know, things are changing very quickly. I was attending the pre-conference seminar regarding Plan S this morning, and so things are changing very quickly. We do think that the future will be open. So we have use a motto, which is as open as possible, as close and as necessary, and we think that it will be important to follow those directions in every aspect of the future for libraries. I think that in the past, the libraries, we know, of course, that very well. We relied on physical collections for many years, so people were coming to libraries. We were very attractive. So what we have done basically is concentrate all these collections and let people come and get access to these collections. But with the internet era, things changed very dramatically. And now, of course, everything is online, everything is on the internet. So when we start discussing with decision makers in our universities at a European level and so on, they say, okay, but giving access to all that content, thanks to internet, it's just the normal situation. It's just a normal rule. So so we have to provide something extra if we want to remain players in the game. And so that's why we need to be present in those areas I have presented, connected to our strategy in Lille, but it's not different from the strategy we think that most of the libraries, research-intensive libraries, should follow for the future, is rely on those pillars: campus life, teaching and learning, and support to research. And I think that support to research is maybe the most important, because this is the most challenging one. You know, the first two ones, we are there, we are recognized for that. But supporting research, it's not there yet. And when we have conversations with decision makers in universities, most of the decision makers do not yet know what the future will be, what is expected, what can be the best way to support research in our universities. But what we all know is that a large part of the money will come thanks to that. You know, Europe has a very important strategy regarding research support. It's inserted, it's inside the EOSC infrastructures, donc European Open Access Science Cloud, or European Open Science Cloud. So that's where the European Commission is putting a lot of money to support production of data, getting access to data, and so on. Europe is believing that the opening of data, the cataloging of data, the storing of data, and so on, will be so important in the future. Publication, it's on the way. We have seen that with the Plan S. But data is a very challenging one. So this is maybe the most important part we should develop in research libraries, because if decision makers think at a European level, at a national level, at a university level, that these are the more strategic directions, then we have to be in, or we'll be totally out.
So it's been my impression from talking with colleagues, attending meetings in Europe and the US, and you probably might agree that the US is seen as lagging Europe in the whole movements towards open access, towards open science, Plan S, and so on. I was wondering why you think that might be, and more importantly, is our slowness to adopt some of these things a hindrance globally? I mean, does it have an impact on how fast the rest of the world can proceed?
I don't know the context in the US pretty well, not so well as I know the context in Europe. But what I had to say is that the open access movement in Europe is a very strong one. It has been committed by European Commission. It has been supported by national levels. It has been supported by funders and so on. So maybe that's the first reason why there is a difference between Europe and the US. It's because I'm not saying that everyone was in favor of every aspect of the Plan S development. So we had some strong discussions, some very important discussions in Europe. But at least there was a global feeling that open access was the right way to achieve higher education and research goals in Europe. And I'm not sure that the landscape in the US with, for example, different consortia, different organizations. I'm not sure that the context of the US is very convenient so that we can, in the same agenda, implement all of that. So maybe that's one of the reasons. What I can say is that, as I said before, the discussions around Plan S has been very vivid in Europe also. We had some people who wanted to go very fast and to implement the Plan S very quickly, and some other people who had, let's say, some reserves regarding the Plan S, the pace of it, and the measures that were included in the Plan S. Regarding the general directions, so which is the behind the Plan S, so opening all the publications which have been funded publicly or privately by national, international, European funders and so on, without embargo, so that we can give immediate access to that. I think that the principle is absolutely fine, because we know that if we want to accelerate the spreading of the research, if we want to accelerate the way that researchers are discussing, are using papers of other researchers, open access is the right way to do things. When you have a look at the money we spend to produce that research, it's very interesting, because it's more or less 96% of the money which is paid to support the salary, to support the research itself, and so on. And it's only less than 4% which is connected to the publication itself. So it's always a bit tricky to see that only a small part of the money spent is preventing giving access to the publications done by the researchers themselves. So the general direction of the Plan S is fine. I think that the difficulty we had regarding the Plan S, and maybe that's one of the reason the discussion was a bit difficult in the US regarding the Plan S, though we have some recent support from the YALA associations, which is RL UK, LIBER, CARL, and also IRL. So we have now the support of the IRL associations also to the Plan S. But the main reason why was maybe that the first version of the Plan S was maybe let's say too ambitious. The shift was maybe too ambitious in a very limited time. So several concerns has been pointed at by colleagues, and so in Europe we had a consultation about the Plan S, so that we can make some change in the Plan S by the end, and so the schedule has been changed. So now it's the implementation, it will be starting in 2021. We will have several changes so that hopefully it will take a bit more time for people to adapt to this new model. So maybe that's the reason why in the States the reception of a Plan S was not so good. It was because it was maybe too quick, and it didn't take into account some aspects regarding, for example, humanities and social science publishers, middle-sized publisher. That's the issue of compliance, for example. In the first version of the Plan S, the compliance for publishers, for repositories was very high level, so that nearly no one, except the biggest publisher, can be compliant with that. So I can understand that in the States that was a major issue for many people. Yes, I think that's now. I'm not saying that I'm not a fortune teller, so I'm not saying that the future of the Plan S is written, but the sign we have at the moment from the Global South, for example, which is more and more supportive, even if they can face difficulties because the compliance level is still there. And from Northern America, it shows that hopefully, maybe taking more time, but in the future, most of the directions set by the Plan S will be probably implemented, and for the benefits of the research, because that's the main. That's why we're doing that. It's not because we want things to change because of political reasons or so on. It's because we need to accelerate the spreading of research. We need to accelerate the way people can get access to publication and so on. So I think that's the right direction.
So let me change topics for a few minutes. You've been committed for a very long time to professional education and training for library managers, for library directors, and you've done that through Library and you've done that through ABDU. Can you talk a little bit about those initiatives, and what does it take to have success in those areas?
Yes. We live in very changing times at the moment. And in every area, for every jobs. But I guess that for higher education and research, and specifically for libraries, the change are incredible since 20 years or 30 years. When we have a look in the mirror at what happened 30 years ago, what the job was in libraries, it's totally different now. So it means that we need to change the kind of skills people must have in our staff. But we also need to change that at the top level. Because if the top level is not changing, if the top level is not moving to a new vision of what the library future will be, nothing will happen, you know. So I think that the first step we need is to make sure that the leaders of the libraries are well equipped for the future. That's what I try to do in France, and that's what I try to do for Library. So let's talk about what we did in France with the ADBU, which is the French National Association for Higher Education and Research Libraries. For many years now, we have a program for newly appointed directors, which is a very good thing, because appointed directors, most of them, not to say all of them, have been high-level people in a library, head of a department, collection department, head of a research department, deputy director, and so on. But when you become a library director, you have, let's say, you start a different conversation with the authorities of the universities, with the different services of the university. Because you are, and I like this expression, you are the university librarian. So meaning people are coming to you and said, you are the library. So you have to change some of your skills. You have to develop a more strategic vision for the head of the university. And you have to be even more, for your staff, a leader, because they are expecting you to lead them in the right directions. So we have created, I think something like a bit less than 20 years ago, a program, a 10 days program in France, which is delivered by the ministry in collaboration with the ADBU, so that's why I was doing it, with 3 sessions, one about the general background expected from for a library director, so meaning what's happening in the ministry, how a university is organized, who is doing what are how decision making is taken, and so on. How can we get some money from the regional area, and so on. So many aspects just like that, so that you can be able to build a strategy and get the resources for that. Right. We have a second module of 3 days, which is about management, so management, leadership, and so on. And we have a last one, which used to be 4 days. I'm not sure it's still 4 days, but 3 or 4 days, about digital skills. So digital management, right, and general political and institutional background. So that was what happened in France. And when I came to Libre, because I'm now the Libre vice president, as you said, but when I joined Libre in 2010, I was the chair of one of the steering committees. I've been recruited by the Libre president at that time to implement a strategy for Libre to support leadership. So we had a strategy with 2 kind of services. One is called the leadership program, and one is called the journeys program. So I will present both. The leadership program started first, so it was in 2011. So it's basically a program for, let's say, second-tier people in university libraries or research libraries or national libraries or so on. So people in charge of large departments, large services, who in the future, because they are young professionals, in the future, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they will probably be appointed at some time as a library director somewhere. So we wanted them to be equipped to perform well that when they will be appointed. So what we basically designed is a 2 years program. It's so 2 weeks. The first week, year 1, is connected to the general conference, the first year, and the second week, the second year, also connected to the general conference, so 1 year after, to have just like 2.5 days every year of teaching and learning regarding leadership and development and management skills. And in between, we have an internship, so that people are sent abroad, somewhere in Europe, to see how things are happening somewhere else. They have a mentor, which is someone from the library itself. Usually it's the library director, and they have a tutor who is from the Libre organization. So someone who is making sure that things happening properly in for the internship, and someone from the university where the internship happens, who is the mentor, usually the library director. And so they see what's happening in the library, but most important, they are shadowing the library director. So it's a full week, and then whenever he goes to a meeting with the vice director for research, unless it's very confidential, but he's with the library director, and so he's seeing how things are happening. And then we have a debriefing, we have several debriefings all together, so that we can make sure that he has really seen what was happening, and he has really understood the way the library director is managing the team, is dealing with the politics and so on. So it's a good program, because we are currently preparing the 5th cohort. So 4 cohort in the past, 20 to 25 people. So we have nearly 100 people, and among these 100 people since the beginning, 2011, we have, let's say, 15 people who has made a step forward and has taken a position of a director, either in a library or in a museum or so on. So we have a network now, and we have a very successful program. So this is the first one. And the second one is rather young, because this has been created in 2015. It's what we call the journeys. It's a French word, because the first time it was in Paris, in Sciences Po Paris, because it was easy for me for the first time to have a very good collaboration with a university I knew pretty well, which was Sciences Po Paris, and Paris is very attractive also, so it was fine. So this is for library directors, and not every library directors. It's for library directors with some experience, a lot of experience. The idea is that we put very high-level colleagues all together. We have very high-level inspirational speakers from, let's say, vice directors for research, people from the European Commissions, colleagues from with a lot of experience. In 2015, Sarah Thomas, the Dean of the Libraries of Harvard, was one of the speakers, for instance. So we have those kind of speakers, and the idea is that we pull all of those people together 2 days and a half, so that we can share with the speakers, but among the people, and the speakers are also remaining for the whole time of the journeys. So people can speak all together and can build all together, let's say, a shared vision of what the future of a library is. So it's not only a library director talking with a few colleagues or talking on its own with his rector or vice rector. Is people with a lot of experience, having seen a lot of things, all together, sharing their concern, talking about directions, talking about the future of libraries. So it's very, again, it's very interesting, and it was quite a success. So we had it in 2015, in 2017, and it will happen next spring in May, mid-May in Budapest. So it will be the third session of this. We have it every 2 or 3 years, basically, because it's a lot of time to organize that.
Well, you've described a very sophisticated approach to providing training for library directors and upper managers, but I'm wondering about the entry-level librarians. Here in the States, the standard credential is the MLS, the Master's in Library Science. How do you all handle that in Europe? I understand the MLS is not that prevalent in Europe. What kind of backgrounds are you looking for when you're hiring new librarians at the University of Lille?
Honestly, more or less, we have the same kind of recruitment you have. So we have Master in Library and Information Science. Okay. So most of the people have a license in Library and Information Science or Master in Library and Information Science. So it's more or less the same kind of things. But the difference is that we have a lot of civil servants, and these civil servants are recruited thanks to a competitive exam. So thanks to that competitive exam, we can have slightly different backgrounds. We have a lot of people being a librarian at a different level, but most of the time at the top level, who have not studied library and information science. They have studied mainly humanities and social science. And we have a real difficulty to recruit hard science profiles. So, and we also have people with PhDs in different areas. So they pass the competitive exam, and then they spend 1 year and a half in a school, which is called the School for High-Level People in Libraries, so the NCIP school. In this school, all the top-level people in the libraries, in higher education and research institutions, spend one year and a half, so that then they can have the expected skills in library and information science. So that's maybe the difference. If we recruit just like contracts, then most of them have a library and information science background from the university. If we recruit civil servants, and most of the recruitments we have are civil servants, then if it's top level, it's usually people with no library and information science background, recruited in other backgrounds, but then they have 1 year and a half to develop the competency we need for them to have. So results is the same. We have very skilled, very high level colleagues in our libraries, but maybe the kind of recruitment we have is a bit different.
Yes, it sounds like it. In fact, you're a good example of that, because your background is as a archivist, paleographer, and a medievalist. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Can you tell us how that background has contributed to your success in being a library director?
Yes. Well, I'm a good example, as you said, because I went to study medieval history in that school of charts at the university and so on, and then I decided to become a librarian. And then I studied at that school, at the NCIP school, and then I got the skills needed for a librarian, and then I became a librarian. So at the very beginning, when I was a librarian at the first years, I still published things in medieval history, about heresy and so on. And then it stopped. And then now I'm publishing in library and information science.
You don't have time.
I try to have some, because I think it's important sometimes to keep publishing, to keep taking the time to think about what you've done, and not only doing things, but also writing about what you've done, what you think about the way the profession is doing things. So getting back to your questions, I think that the first thing I learned from my background is that, since I'm an historian, is that you have to see things over the long term. We are living in a changing world. It's changing very rapidly. But when you take the time to have a look at that and say, okay, maybe if we take a little more time, we will see that some long-term trends will appear. So, and basically we know the long-term trends we have. The moving to physical collection to electronic ones, it's a good example. And another good example is the opening of publication, starting from traditional model of publication, and the opening, we talked about planners and many things, but I think this is a long trend. So maybe that's the kind of thing I learned. So I take the time, wait a little bit, see how things are moving. Do not move too fast, because you will move in the wrong directions, but take some time. And maybe the second thing I've learned is that, because I have in that school, I have a School of Charts PhD in heresy in south of France. So I think that I'm rigorous in what I'm doing, because I've done some research. It took some time. I developed a methodology and so on. And that's what I try to implement in the way I'm working in my library. With the people I'm working with, you know, I need notes. I need to take the time to read things, to rewrite things, to say, oh no, we are not ready yet, so let's take some time. Is it absolutely urgent that we answer the vice rector who is saying, we need an answer, but is it absolutely urgent? And the answer most of the time is no. You see, we can take some time. So that's maybe a second thing I've learned from the background. And so I'm working in a totally different world now, because library and information science is totally different. But I think that, yes, what you have studied when you were a student can have a lot of influence in what's happening after, and I think that's what's happening for me.
Well, let me ask you one last question. What was it about librarianship that drew you away from medieval history?
Basically because when you get out of the School of Charts, you have several choices. You can work in archives, you can work in museums, you can work in libraries, and you can work as a researcher. And to be totally frank, when you study medieval history and you have a look at the way history is moving, what happens? We have less and less students, less and less teachers, less and less research labs in ancient history, in medieval history, even in modern history, and more in contemporary one. And that's because the world is moving. So when you study medieval history and you see less and less professors, less and less labs, less and less students, and people not working on the real sources, because a lot of people cannot read Latin, cannot read medieval Occitan, cannot read medieval French, cannot read the way it's written itself, even from the modern history. So they are working on what has been published in the 18th, in the 19th century. You say, well, maybe I could change to work in a different area. And so I said, well, library, it's in a very challenging time at the moment. It was in the beginning of the years 2000. Electronic was there, so we moved from physical collections to electronic and so on. So I said, yes, maybe that's quite challenging, that's quite interesting, so let's go and work in this area.
Well, that's wonderful. And I do want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come and talk to us. It's really been, I've enjoyed it thoroughly. I've learned an awful lot. So again, thank you very much for coming in and allowing us to chat with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.